How we doing, everybody? Captain Cody Davis here. Welcome to Tight Splice Charters. I am just going through miscellaneous tackle and tinkering with rods and reels on a day off I have here. But wanted to shoot a quick video and just talk to you guys about the upcoming months we have here in our near future, going into our summer or spring and summer patterns down here in Southeast Florida, and talk about what's going to be going on. As a full-time guide out here on Lake Okeechobee, our busy season is now coming to the end point, going into the end of March here. And, prior to me being a full-time guide, through the years of me fishing Lake Okeechobee my whole life, listening to the local business owners and all the other guides out there, it never really made sense to me why there would be an off-season at all. But even if there is an off-season, why the season would end so early come the end of March. Without a doubt, no questions asked, if you were to ask me what's my favorite time to fish at Lake Okeechobee, it's the months April and May. April and May for Lake Okeechobee, April and May for the Everglades, April and May for off the coast offshore fishing, and April and May for inshore fishing for snook and tarpon. Everything in Southeast Florida fires come April and May. That is the start of spring, warming trends, warm weather. And just like Florida people, the Florida fish love warm weather. They don't do well in the cold. If you come down and offshore fish off the East Coast, the blackfin tuna is the biggest kingfish you're going to see all year. The bottom fishing's phenomenal. Cobias, wahoo, everything. If you're coming down to offshore fish off of the East Coast of South Florida, April, May, best 2 months, no questions asked. That's when all the big tournaments are held. That's the time. Inshore fishing, the snook start to make their way out to the inlets and passes, and the tarpon are migrating down the beach in huge numbers, so they're easier to catch, I should say. Exotics, all the people that come down to not just fish for largemouths, but to fish for peacock bass, snakeheads, clown knifefish, all the exotic fish that we have down here in our state, they fire off because the water temperature finally reaches that warm enough temperature for them to feed, and be comfortable. So that's the best fishing for them as well. And the same thing goes for the largemouth bass, not only out here on Okeechobee, but also down in the Florida Everglades. And, I get it. When people come down to Florida, a lot of people come down seasonally. They just come down to get out of the brutal cold up north and get into the 75 beautiful sunny postcard weather we have down here in Florida's wintertime. But I get it. April through August is extremely hot, but the fishing can be too. And, I try to encourage people to take a fishing trip, take a trip down and come down and experience our amazing fishery we have down here going into the spring and summer months. And one of the reasons it gets me so excited is the style of fishing we get to do come the spring and summer that doesn't really show out or isn't as effective in the winter months down here. And they're two of my favorite ways to fish, and I was going to talk to you guys about them because judging by my customer base, who I talk to and what they're interested in, it seems like it's most people's favorite way to fish as well. Just in the wintertime, these techniques and patterns don't really come into effect. So what happens in April and May when that water really starts to warm? The whole story, the whole pattern has to do with bluegill. Now, I love catching big bluegill. I don't know, I've never met anyone who doesn't love catching big bluegill. They're fun, you can eat them, they're great to have fun with the kids, take them out and get them introduced to the sport. But what do I like catching more than bluegill? The 5 to 10 pound bass that are eating the bluegill everyone else is trying to catch. And that goes with any body of water, especially down here in South Florida come the springtime. That's the name of the game. You have to be around the bluegill. But what does that mean? I'd have to say 80% of my customers that come down to fish with me, they're going to hit you with two things. They want to catch big fish, and a lot of them want to catch them on some sort of a top water presentation. Everyone I talk to loves top water because who doesn't? You get to see the explosion. It's great. So what happens also in the spring and summer months is we get a big shad spawn. The thing with the shad spawn is it typically only lasts about the first half hour of safe light. So typically this time of year, you'll run out on the lake, get on the main lake grass edge, and throw baits like some kind of a walking bait, like a Zara spook or a pop-R, whatever's best for you. and or a rattling bait, a lipless, like a rattle trap, or this one just happens to be a Lucky Craft, I believe, but it doesn't matter. Any type of lipless crankbait works fantastic. A spinner bait, a white swim jig, anything that's going to imitate a shad, you're going to get bit. Now, most of the time, your shad spawn fish aren't the biggest in the world, but you can catch a lot of them. They're super aggressive. They'll hit your top water. You can catch 2 at a time on a rattle trap when you find the right school. It's a lot of fun. But once that sun gets up to a certain point, the shad kind of disperse, and as the fish have already fed up, and that kind of slows down. So typically, once that happens, you go up in the shallow waters and you're looking for the bluegill eaters, the ones you want, the big, bad, single fish. How do you target those? What do we use? I can't tell you how many people get on my boat and they're interested in throwing a frog. I don't know what, I love throwing a frog, but then again, I'm born and raised down here in South Florida, so that's a standard. But due to social media and YouTube and everything else, there's frog fishing groups. It's almost become like a swim bait genre, how you have the big swim bait culture out on the West Coast. Seems like the whole country's taken over with everybody being fascinated with throwing frogs, which is awesome. And it's an amazing way to fish, and it's an amazing way to catch big fish down here in Florida, especially this time of year coming up. I actually have customers that reached out to me and told me, tell me when the frog bite is on, and I am on a plane. So hopefully once this whole coronavirus thing settles itself out, I will be sending emails and phone calls to all of you. Hopefully some of you guys are watching, because it's happening right now. 25, 30 bites a day on a frog has been happening every day for the past 3 or 4 days out there, and it's only going to get better from here. So, what do? We make our way to the back. You find where these brim, or bluegill as we call them, are spawning, and our brim beds could be 10 feet wide with 20 brim on them, or they could be 75 square yards wide with hundreds of brim on them. Either way, if you're around the bluegill, you're around the bass. One of the best ways to catch them, right here, this is a Spro popping frog. I'm sure if you are familiar with any type of frog fishing, you've seen this guy before. And no secret, the only color to throw on a Lake Okeechobee is this killer gill color. Why? Because we are in no means, any way, shape, or form trying to make this look anything like a frog. You want them to think this is an injured or dying bluegill. So you get around these brim beds or these areas where you think the bluegill are spawning, and you chuck this guy around. Work it fairly aggressively, and you get some amazing blow-ups, some huge fish, and you can catch a lot of them. Now, the thing is, with these brim fish, they're not typically in schools. They're big, rogue, single fish that are just cruising these grass lines and looking to eat one bluegill a day. Granted, these brim that they're eating, are the size of your hand, so they have to be big fish that are eating them. So you're only going to get, some days are better than others, but 10 bites running this pattern is a great day, and typically the fish are over 5 pounds up to 10. I think the biggest fish in the lake get caught this time of year. So again, frog, everyone loves throwing a frog. Everyone loves seeing an 8-pound bass just flush the toilet on a giant topwater bait. There's nothing better. You're fishing it on 65-pound braid and heavy action rod, big hook sets, big line, big fish. The next way that we catch them, which is without a doubt my favorite way to catch them, and maybe that's why this is my favorite time of year to fish the lake, is because this pattern is the deal. If you just watch the Toyota series, was just one out here by Brandon Medlock doing the same exact technique, and that's flipping a jig. Without a doubt, no questions asked, my favorite way to catch a bass. If I could do it, if I get bit on it, I don't care what other bite is happening around the world, around the lake. All I want to be is on Lake Okeechobee flipping a jig. So what's makes us different down here in Florida, and I'm sure there's other states that this kind of happens in as well, probably Texas or whatever. When you're flipping a jig anywhere else in the country, you're typically trying to imitate a crawfish. Flipping it around boat docks, whatnot, 17, 20-pound fluorocarbon, crawling it on the bottom with a craw colored trailer and trying to make it look as much like a crawfish as you possibly can. Down here, you want it to look like a bluegill. Hence why our jigs are we try to fish the bulkiest, biggest trailer and biggest skirt we can. This is a 3/4 ounce Gambler Jigzilla. This is my jig of choice, but any jig that you have confidence in will work. It's got a giant gauge hook on there, really stout. I really like the shape of the head on this jig. Falls through the grass, nice, really thick weed guard. And this is just I think this is a Reaction Innovation Spicy Beaver, but any big profiled trailer will work great. All you're going to do is find these brim are going to bed typically around reed lines. So any isolated cover you can find, whether it's buggy whips, cattails, even peppergrass, whatever, you're going to make accurate, quiet pitches with this guy. And what you're trying to imitate is a brim that is just lost and just falls in a bass's face, and they hammer this thing. I had 28, 30 bites on this yesterday afternoon in just a couple of hours, which is not typical. Granted, I only had 2 or 3 really nice fish. One of them was probably about 7 pounds or so, big fish. But I had a bunch of smaller bites on it, which does not typically happen, but hey, I'm not gonna, I'm not scared to poke a hole in a small one either. So really, really fun. But yeah, I mean, the fishing's gonna get, the weather's gonna get a lot hotter, but so is the fishing. So I encourage you guys, if you guys want to come down and make a fishing trip in Florida, April and May is the time. We could do a trip on the lake. You could knock them all out. Trip on the lake, trip down in the Everglades. We could do a snook and tarpon trip, a peacock bass trip. I don't do offshore charters, but I have plenty of connections of people that do. And like I said, April and May are the time to not only be in the state, but to be offshore, fishing offshore on the east coast of Florida as well. But for all you guys that want to try and catch big, aggressive fish in shallow water, and fish heavy line, big hook sets, catch them on top water. Everyone loves catching them on a top water plug, catch a lot of fish. Don't be afraid of the sun. Put sunblock on. We bring a 24 pack of water in the boat, fill the cooler with ice, and go to work. And yeah, it's my favorite time of year. So if you guys have any questions about coming down and catching giant bass on Lake Okeechobee or big snook in the backwater, let me know. I think I'll probably, at the end of this, I'm probably going to have some fish catches from the other day. Check them out. And yeah, if you guys have questions, feel free to shoot me a line, give me a call, shoot me a text, whatever works best for you. And more than happy to help anybody out and answer any questions you guys have. So until the next video, enjoy the clips. And tight lines, guys. That's a bluegill leader right there, boys. And that's up. Oh, just